The billionaire thought it was just a cup of tea, until he found a tiny note hidden under it. The tea was still steaming when Marcus Hale noticed it. Not the tea itself. The folded paper underneath the saucer. He almost missed it. His hands were tired from a 12-hour day of board calls and lawyers who talked in circles. All he wanted was 5 quiet minutes before bed. He lifted the cup. The paper sat there, small and white, pressed flat against the dark wood of his desk. He unfolded it. 4 words, written in careful, slanted handwriting. Ask about March 14th. Marcus went still. He knew that date the way some people know their own birthday. March 14th was the day his brother Daniel had died. 4 years ago. A car wrapped around a guardrail on a road he shouldn't have even been driving that night. Nobody talked about March 14th. Not the staff. Not the board. Not even Marcus, if he could help it. So who left this? He turned toward the door. The tea tray was still there, the little silver pot cooling beside it. But the hallway outside his study was empty. No footsteps. No voice calling good night. Just silence, and the faint smell of jasmine tea, and a note that had no business existing. Elena. He said the housekeeper's name into the empty room, already knowing she wouldn't answer. She never lingered. She brought the tray at exactly 9 o'clock, set it down without a word, and disappeared like smoke before he could look up from his laptop. He'd worked with her for almost a year and couldn't remember hearing her say more than good evening, sir. Marcus looked down at the paper again, reading it a second time, then a third, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Ask about March 14th. Ask who? Ask what? His brother was gone. The case was closed. The file was sealed in a drawer he hadn't opened in years, in a house he hadn't visited since the funeral. And yet someone in his own home, someone paid to stay invisible, had just reached into the one wound Marcus never let anyone touch. He folded the note back along its crease, slow and careful, like it might break. Outside his window, past the dark garden, a single light was still on in the staff quarters. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he asked himself the question that would not let him sleep that night. What does a housekeeper know about the night my brother died, that I don't? Marcus Hale did not sleep well. He hadn't slept well in 4 years, if he was honest, but tonight was worse. He lay in the dark of his bedroom, staring at the ceiling, turning the little note over in his mind like a stone he couldn't put down. By 6 in the morning, he'd given up on rest entirely and gone downstairs. The kitchen was already alive with the quiet business of the house. Pots on the stove. The smell of coffee. And there, at the counter, was Elena Cruz. Sleeves rolled up, hair pulled back, moving through her morning routine like she'd done it 1,000 times, because she had. She didn't hear him come in. For a moment, Marcus just watched her. She was maybe 32, small and quick, with the kind of tired eyes that came from working 2 jobs worth of hours for 1 job's worth of pay. He knew almost nothing about her. He'd hired her through an agency. She'd never missed a day. That was the extent of what he could have told anyone about Elena Cruz. "Good morning," he said. She startled, nearly dropping the spoon in her hand. "Mr. Hale." "I didn't. Good morning. Your coffee's almost ready. I wanted to ask you something." Something shifted in her face. Small, but Marcus caught it, the particular stillness of a person bracing for bad news. "Of course," she said. He held up the folded note. "Did you put this under my tea last night?" Elena looked at the paper the way a person looks at a snake in the grass. "I don't know what that is." "It was under the saucer. You brought the tray." "I bring the tray every night, sir. I don't write notes." Her voice was even, but her hands weren't. She'd started twisting the dish towel between her fingers, slow and tight. "Elena. I have to start on the upstairs rooms." She was already moving past him, eyes down, and Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Certainty that someone was lying to him and that the lie mattered. "Wait." She didn't wait. She walked fast, the way people walk when they're trying very hard not to run, and disappeared through the door toward the staff wing. Marcus stood alone in his kitchen holding a scrap of paper and an unfamiliar, uncomfortable feeling. He decided to follow her. He told himself it was reasonable. He owned the house. He had every right to walk its halls. But some part of him knew that trailing his housekeeper toward her private quarters was not reasonable at all. It was something else. Something closer to desperation. The staff wing was modest, a narrow hallway, a shared sitting room, a few small bedrooms. Marcus had walked through it exactly twice in the 4 years he'd owned the estate. He heard the voice before he reached the door. Not Elena's. Smaller. Younger. "Mama, look, I made a boat." He stopped in the hallway, out of sight, and looked through the half-open door. A little girl sat cross-legged on the floor, no older than 3, holding up a lopsided paper boat with the fierce pride only small children can manage. Elena knelt in front of her, and for the first time since Marcus had known her, her whole face had changed. Soft. Open. Lit up like a window with the lamp turned on inside. "It's beautiful, Mija," Elena said, and kissed the top of the girl's head. "The best boat I've ever seen." Marcus had not known there was a child in his house. He should have. It was his estate, his staff, his responsibility, and yet he'd never once asked Elena if she had a family, because he'd never once thought to ask his staff anything that wasn't about the house. He watched a moment longer than he should have. The girl laughed at something, a bright, unguarded sound, and Elena laughed too, and for just a second Marcus felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been sealed shut since March 14th, 4 years ago. Then Elena looked up and saw him in the doorway. The light went out of her face instantly. "Mr. Hale." She stood, pulling the girl gently behind her, an old, practiced motion. "I'm sorry, I didn't think anyone would. She's not usually out here. I keep her in the back room during work hours. I know that's the rule, please don't." "There's no rule," Marcus said quietly. "I didn't know you had a daughter." "I need this job," Elena said, and her voice cracked slightly on the word need. "Please. She's no trouble. I'll keep her quiet." "I'm not upset about the child, Elena." "Then what?" "I want to know about the note." Something in her seemed to fold inward. She glanced down at her daughter, then back at Marcus, and for one long moment he watched her weigh something, a decision balanced on a blade's edge. "I told you," she said finally, quiet and controlled. "I don't know anything about a note." "March 14th, Marcus said. "That's my brother's death date. Only 3 people outside this family ever knew that date without being told. His lawyer, his doctor, and whoever was with him that night." Elena's face went the color of paper. "I have to go," she said. "I have work." She turned, gathering her daughter up into her arms in one practiced motion, and walked quickly toward her room, not the exit, Marcus noticed. Toward her room, like she needed to check on something, hide something, protect something. He followed, slower now, giving her space, but close enough to see through the doorway as she set her daughter down and reached for a small box on the shelf above her bed. Her hands were shaking. The box slipped. A photograph slid loose and fluttered to the floor, landing face up between them. Marcus only caught a glimpse before Elena snatched it back, but it was enough. A young man, laughing, arms slung around a woman's shoulders. The woman was younger, her hair longer, but it was unmistakably Elena. The young man was his brother. Daniel. Marcus felt the floor tilt beneath him. "Elena." His voice came out barely above a whisper. "Who is that man to you?" Elena clutched the photograph to her chest like a shield, tears rising fast in her eyes, and for the first time since he'd known her, she didn't look away. "You should sit down, Mr. Hale," she said. "Because once I tell you, there's no going back to not knowing." Marcus didn't sit down. He stood in the doorway of a room smaller than his own closet, staring at a woman he'd employed for a year and somehow never truly seen, waiting for words that felt like they might break something inside him before they even arrived. "Please," he said. "Just tell me." Elena looked down at the photograph in her hands, then at her daughter, who had gone quiet, sensing, the way children do, that something important and frightening was happening above her head. "Not here," Elena said softly. "Not in front of her." She knelt, murmured something in Spanish to the little girl, something gentle about going to play in the garden with Rosa from the kitchen. The girl nodded, unbothered, and toddled off down the hall, and Marcus watched Elena's eyes follow her the whole way, like she was afraid to let her out of sight even for a moment. When she finally turned back to him, something in her posture had changed. Smaller. Braced. "I worked at a hotel 4 years ago," she said. "In the city. Housekeeping, same as here. Daniel used to come in some weekends. He liked the quiet. He said it was the only place nobody wanted anything from him." Marcus's chest tightened at the sound of his brother's name in her mouth, said with such familiarity. "He was kind to me," Elena went on. "Not the way rich men are usually kind to women who clean their rooms. He remembered my name. He asked about my day. And then one day she stopped, pressing her lips together. It became something else. Something neither of us planned. You were together. For 8 months. In secret. He said his family wouldn't understand, that you especially wouldn't understand." Her voice wavered on the word you. "He was planning to tell you. He told me the week before he died that he was finally going to bring me to meet his family. That he was tired of hiding it." Marcus felt the ground shift again, some old memory stirring loose. The week before. He remembered that week. He remembered a phone call, Daniel's voice unusually nervous, saying he needed to talk to Marcus about something important, something that couldn't wait. Marcus, buried in a merger that had consumed his whole life, had told him it would have to wait until the weekend. The weekend never came. "He never told me," Marcus said quietly. "Whatever it was. I never let him." Elena's eyes glistened. "He didn't get the chance to tell anyone." The silence between them stretched long and heavy. "Why now?" Marcus finally asked. "Why leave me a note after 4 years of silence? Why not just tell me the truth from the beginning?" Elena's hands tightened around the photograph. "Because the truth would have cost me my job the moment I said it. A poor housekeeper claiming a connection to your dead brother. You would have thought I wanted something from you. Money. A story to sell. And now." She hesitated, and in that hesitation Marcus saw something new. Fear, but a different kind than before. Not fear of losing a job. "Now there isn't time to be careful anymore," she said. That answer troubled him more than it satisfied him, and it followed him the rest of the day like a shadow that wouldn't lie flat. He cancelled 2 calls. He sat in his study, staring at the wall, turning over everything he thought he knew about his brother's final months. If Elena was telling the truth, and something in her face, raw and unrehearsed, told him she was, then Daniel had been living a whole second life that Marcus had known nothing about. That evening, a second note appeared. Not under his tea this time. Tucked into the file folder on his desk, where only someone with access to his study could have placed it. Some things are safer as secrets, until they're not. Marcus stared at the handwriting. Different from the first note. Rounder. Less careful. Not Elena's hand. Someone else in his house knew something too. He found out who 2 days later, and not in a way he expected. Whitfield had been head of household staff for 11 years, a stiff, efficient man who ran the estate like a ship's captain and reported, dutifully, to whoever signed his checks. Marcus trusted him the way people trust furniture. Present, useful, unremarkable. He didn't notice, until he did, that Whitfield had been making phone calls from the east hallway at odd hours. Short calls. Quiet ones. Marcus only caught the tail end of one, passing by the servant's stairwell on his way to bed. "Yes, the girl exists. 3 years old. I don't know what he intends to do about it, Ms. Reyes, but I'd start preparing for the worst if I were you." Ms. Reyes. Camille Reyes. Marcus's ex-fiancée. Also, inconveniently, his business partner in the merger currently consuming both their lives. A merger that hinged, in no small part, on Marcus's public image remaining spotless, stable, and scandal-free. Marcus stepped back into the shadow of the stairwell, his blood running cold. Whitfield was feeding information about Sophia to Camille. And Camille did not deal in secrets out of kindness. She dealt in leverage. The next morning, Marcus went looking for Elena to warn her. He wasn't yet sure of what, exactly, only that danger was circling closer than she realized, and found her in the kitchen, pale, gripping the edge of the counter like it was the only thing holding her upright. "Elena!" She startled, and the motion seemed to cost her something. Her breath came shallow. A folded prescription slip sat half-hidden beneath a stack of dish towels, like she'd tried to hide it and hadn't managed in time. Marcus picked it up before he could stop himself. Cardiac consultation. Follow-up required. Payment plan. Final notice. "You're sick," he said, and it wasn't a question. Elena snatched the paper back, her hands trembling worse than before. "It's nothing. A minor thing. I manage it. This doesn't look like nothing." "I need this job, Mr. Hale," she said, and her voice cracked down the middle. "I need it more than you know. If I lose it, I lose everything, the treatment, the roof over Sophia's head, all of it. So please, whatever you think you know, whatever Whitfield has been whispering." She stopped herself too late, realizing what she'd revealed. "You know about Whitfield," Marcus said slowly. "I know he watches me," Elena said. "I know he's been asking questions about Sophia. I know someone wants this secret to hurt me instead of help anyone." Her breathing had gone ragged now, her hand pressed flat against her chest. "I should have told you the truth the day I started working here. I should have told Daniel's family the moment he died, instead of hiding, but I was scared, and now it's too late to do it the easy way." "Elena, sit down. There's something you don't know," she said, gripping the counter harder, her face draining of color. "Something about Sophia. About why I really came to work in this house. It wasn't chance, Mr. Hale. I chose this house. I chose you." "What are you talking about?" Elena's eyes locked onto his, wide and desperate, like she was trying to force 4 years of silence into the next 4 seconds before it was too late. "Sophia is." Her knees buckled. Marcus lunged forward, catching her before she hit the floor, her body suddenly, terrifyingly limp in his arms, her lips moving around words that never made it out. "Elena! Elena, stay with me." Somewhere down the hall, he heard Sophia begin to cry, sensing before she could understand it that something in her small world had just gone terribly wrong. The ambulance ride felt like it lasted a lifetime and no time at all. Marcus sat beside the gurney, Sophia clutched against his chest because there had been no one else to hold her, her small fists twisted into his shirt, her cries finally quieting into exhausted hiccups somewhere around the 2nd mile. He had never held a child before. He was surprised by how naturally his arms seemed to know what to do, even while the rest of him felt like it was falling apart. "Sophia is." He didn't know how that sentence ended. He'd spent the entire ride trying to finish it himself and arriving nowhere good. At the hospital, they took Elena back through double doors that swung shut like a verdict, and left Marcus standing in a waiting room with a 3-year-old on his hip and no idea what came next. She stabilized by morning. A cardiac arrhythmia, the doctor explained, made worse by stress, exhaustion, and, this part delivered gently, like the doctor already suspected the answer, a lack of proper follow-up care due to cost. "She needs a procedure," the doctor said. "Sooner rather than later. Without it, this will keep happening, and eventually her heart won't recover from it." Marcus didn't hesitate. "Whatever it costs. Send the bill to me. Don't tell her." The doctor raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. Marcus told himself it was simple decency. A woman had collapsed in his home, of course he'd help. But some smaller, more honest part of him knew it was already more than that some current had shifted at the sight of Elena crumpling in his arms, at the sound of her daughter crying down the hall. When Elena woke that afternoon, groggy and pale against the white pillows, The first thing she said was Sophia's name. "She's fine," Marcus said gently, from the chair beside her bed, Sophia asleep against his shoulder, thumb in her mouth, worn out from a day of fear she didn't have words for. "She's right here. She's safe." Elena's eyes filled instantly. "You stayed?" "Of course I stayed. You have a merger. A board. You don't have time to sit in a hospital room for." "Elena." Marcus's voice was quieter than she'd ever heard it. "Finish the sentence you didn't get to finish yesterday." Elena closed her eyes. When she opened them again, something in her had settled, like she'd made peace with a decision a long time ago and was only now brave enough to say it out loud. "Sophia is Daniel's daughter," she said. "Your niece." The room went very still. Marcus looked down at the sleeping child on his shoulder. Dark hair, a small stubborn chin he suddenly recognized, because he'd seen that same chin in family photographs since he was a boy. "She was born 7 months after he died," Elena continued, her voice thin but steady now that the truth was finally loose in the world. "I never told him I was pregnant. I found out 3 weeks after the funeral. I thought about reaching out to your family, but I had no proof anyone would believe, no money for lawyers, and I was terrified you'd think I was trying to steal something from a family that had just lost a son. So I said nothing. I raised her alone. And a year ago, when I saw a housekeeping position open at your estate, I told myself it was a coincidence I could use, a chance to be near the only family Sophia has left, even if she'd never know it, even if you never knew it. I told myself I'd stay quiet forever if I had to." "Then why the notes?" Elena's throat worked. "Because I got sick, and I got scared, and I realized if something happened to me, no one on earth would know that little girl is a Hale. She'd just be an orphan. I couldn't let that happen. I needed you to start asking questions before I ran out of time to answer them myself." Marcus sat in silence, looking between the sleeping child and the woman in the hospital bed, feeling 4 years of grief and guilt rearrange themselves into an entirely new shape. He had a niece. Daniel had a daughter. And Marcus had spent a year walking past her in his own hallways without knowing her name. He should have felt only joy. Instead, dread settled alongside it, cold and immediate, because he knew, the way you know weather is coming before the sky changes, that this was exactly the kind of secret Camille Reyes would turn into a weapon. He was right. 2 days later, while Elena was still recovering and Sophia was staying in the guest wing under Marcus's roof for the first time in her life, Camille requested an emergency meeting. She didn't come alone. She brought a lawyer, and a folder, and a smile that had once made Marcus feel lucky and now only made him feel cold. "I'll get straight to it," Camille said, sliding the folder across his desk. "Your housekeeper is claiming her daughter is Daniel's child. No paternity test. No documentation. Just a very convenient story, delivered right as she racks up medical bills she can't pay." "Careful, Camille." "I'm being careful, Marcus. That's exactly what I'm doing." She opened the folder. Inside were photographs, Elena entering the hospital, Elena at the estate, a printed email exchange between Whitfield and someone at a tabloid. "Because if this gets out before we control the story, it won't be a sweet family reunion. It'll be Billionaire's housekeeper claims secret heir, demands hush money. And with the merger vote in 11 days, our investors will run from anything that smells like instability. Do you understand what you're risking?" She's not asking for money. She doesn't have to ask. The story writes itself. Camille leaned forward. "Here's what I'm offering. Quiet settlement. A payout, an NDA, and the girl and her mother disappear from your life with dignity and financial security. No test, no scandal, no headline. Clean. And if I refuse?" Then Whitfield's contact runs the story his way, gold-digging maid, dead air, suspicious timing, and there's no controlling how ugly it gets. For you. For the company. And frankly, Marcus, for that little girl, who'll grow up known as the punchline of a tabloid story instead of quietly, privately, as whoever she actually is. Marcus stared at the folder, at the photographs of Elena taken without her knowledge, at the casual cruelty of turning a sick woman and a 3-year-old into leverage for a board vote. "Get out of my office," he said quietly. Camille's smile didn't waver. "Think about it, Marcus. You have until the vote. After that, I can't promise Whitfield's friend at the paper waits for anyone's convenience." That night, Marcus sat with the weight of an impossible choice pressing down on his chest. Protect the company, the thing his father built, the thing 400 employees depended on for their paychecks, the thing that had defined his entire adult life, by letting Camille quietly bury the truth and pay Elena to vanish. Or claim Sophia. Publicly. As his niece, as Daniel's daughter, as family. Knowing it would blow open old wounds, invite scrutiny into his brother's private life, and hand Camille exactly the instability she needed to tank the vote and take control of the merger herself. There was no version where he protected everything. He went to find Elena to tell her what he was facing, to warn her, to promise her he wouldn't let Camille do to her what she was threatening, and found the guest room dark. Empty. The bed made with the same precise care Elena brought to every task in his house, like she couldn't leave a room in disarray even while fleeing it. On the nightstand, folded once, was a single sheet of paper. He recognized the handwriting immediately now, round, careful, achingly familiar. "I heard what she offered you. I won't be the reason you lose everything you and Daniel's memory deserve. I'm sorry I couldn't stay long enough to see you decide. Please don't look for us. Take care of yourself, Mr. Hale. You were kinder to us than you'll ever know. E." Marcus stood frozen in the doorway of the empty room, the note trembling in his hand, and felt something inside him break clean in half. They were gone. And somewhere out there, a sick woman and a 3-year-old girl, his brother's daughter, his own blood, were running from the only safety they'd ever had, because she believed protecting him meant disappearing. He would not let that be the ending. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He didn't try. He sat in his car outside the estate gates until sunrise, phone in hand, calling every number he could think of. The hospital, the cardiologist's office, the transit authority, a private investigator he'd used once during a supplier dispute and never expected to need for anything like this. Elena had no family in the country. No permanent address before the estate. No trail, except the one she couldn't fully erase. A woman with a serious heart condition, traveling with a small child, on limited cash, in a city she barely knew. She would need transportation. She would need somewhere affordable. She would need, eventually, medical attention she couldn't avoid forever. Marcus started with the bus stations. While the investigator worked, memory pulled Marcus somewhere he'd spent 4 years refusing to go. The last phone call. He'd been 36, buried under a due diligence deadline, when Daniel called sounding nervous in a way Marcus had never heard from his easygoing younger brother. "I need to talk to you about something. It's important, Marcus. Family important. Can it wait until the weekend? I'm drowning here." A pause on the line. "Yeah, sure. Weekend. Everything okay?" "I'm happier than I've been in a long time," Daniel had said, and there had been something bright and nervous in his voice that Marcus, distracted, checking emails on his second monitor, had barely registered. "I just need you to actually listen when I tell you why." "I will. I promise. Saturday." Saturday never came. Daniel died on a Thursday, 3 days later, driving home from a hotel across town at 11 at night. A hotel, Marcus now understood with sick clarity, where Elena had been working, where they'd said their goodbyes that evening not knowing it was the last one. If Marcus had listened that day instead of promising later, would Daniel have told him everything? Would there have been a family dinner, an introduction, a chance for Elena to never have to hide at all? He would never know. That was the particular cruelty of grief. It never let you finish the story, only imagine every possible ending except the one that happened. He was not going to make that mistake twice. He would not let later cost him this family too. By mid-afternoon, Camille had made her move. Marcus's phone buzzed with an alert, a business gossip site, small but influential, had just published a piece titled "Hale Family Scandal Brewing." Sources say housekeeper claims secret heir amid critical merger vote. No names yet. Enough details that anyone paying attention would know exactly who it meant. Marcus called Camille immediately. "You said I had until the vote." "I said Whitfield's contact might not wait," Camille replied, unbothered. "I told you the risk. You didn't decide fast enough, so the timeline decided for you. You did this to force my hand. I did this to save the merger, Marcus, whether you thank me for it or not." Marcus felt something in him go cold and clear, the way it sometimes did in the middle of a difficult negotiation, the moment fear burned off and only certainty remained. "Pull the story," he said. "I don't control the outlet. Then watch me pull the merger instead." His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I'll sell my shares to the first buyer who'll take them, tank the vote myself, and let the board explain to investors why their two lead partners couldn't stop feuding long enough to close a deal. You'll lose more than a headline, Camille. You'll lose the whole thing." Silence on the line. "You wouldn't." "Test me," Marcus said, "and find out what 4 years of grief and one very brave woman have taught me about what actually matters." He hung up before she could answer, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt no regret at all about a decision. The investigator called an hour later. Bus station on the east side. A cashier remembers a woman matching her description, sick-looking, with a little girl, bought 2 tickets for a route leaving tonight. Cash payment. "I'm sending the address now." Marcus was already moving before the man finished the sentence, keys in hand, Sophia's small paper boat, left behind on the nightstand in Elena's rush to pack, tucked instinctively into his coat pocket, like some kind of promise he intended to keep. Traffic fought him every mile. He willed the lights green, willed the minutes to slow down, willed 4 years of buried grief into something useful instead of something that only ached. He arrived at the station as the evening light was turning grey and thin. He found them on a bench near the far platform. Sophia sat curled against her mother's side, small and frightened, clutching the strap of a worn bag far too big for a 3-year-old to be responsible for. And Elena. Elena had slid sideways against the bench, unmoving, her lips faintly blue, her breath shallow and fast. "Mama." Sophia was shaking her mother's arm, her voice climbing toward panic. "Mama, wake up, please." "Elena." Marcus was across the platform in seconds, dropping to his knees beside the bench, 2 fingers at her throat, finding a pulse, thready, but there. "Elena, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered, unfocused, finding his face like she couldn't quite believe it. "You weren't supposed to find us," she whispered. "I already called," a stranger nearby said. "Phone still in hand. Ambulance is coming." Sophia flung herself against Marcus's side, small fists gripping his shirt the same way they had in the ambulance days before, and Marcus wrapped one arm around her while his other hand held tight to Elena's, refusing to let go of either one of them. "Stay with us," he said, to Elena, to Sophia, to the family he'd almost lost before he ever fully knew he had it. "Just stay. I'm not letting either of you disappear again." In the distance, sirens rose, growing louder, cutting through the grey evening air, and Marcus knelt there on the cold platform, holding on with everything he had, praying it wouldn't be too late. The surgery took 4 hours. Marcus spent every minute of it in a hospital hallway with Sophia asleep against his chest, her small hand fisted in his collar even in sleep, as though some part of her understood that letting go might mean losing something else. He had called in the best cardiac surgeon in the state, a man who normally required 3 weeks' notice, and had cleared his schedule within 3 hours once Marcus made it clear that money was not a consideration and time was not a luxury. When the surgeon finally emerged, mask pulled down, exhaustion and relief written plainly on his face, Marcus stood so fast Sophia startled awake in his arms. "She's stable," the surgeon said. "The procedure went well. She's going to need rest and follow-up care, but Mr. Hale, she's going to be fine." Marcus closed his eyes. Something that had been wound tight in his chest for days finally loosened. Can we see her? Give her an hour. Then yes. Sophia, blinking awake, looked up at him with the solemn directness only small children seem to manage. Is Mama okay? She's okay, Marcus said, and found, to his surprise, that his voice caught on the words. She's going to be just fine. Sophia studied his face a moment longer, the way children do when they're deciding whether an adult can be trusted with something important. You have Papa's eyes, she said suddenly. Mama has a picture. She says he had kind eyes, like you. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Did she tell you about him? A little. She says he's watching over me from the stars. Sophia considered this with 3-year-old seriousness. Are you my uncle? There was no folder to consult, no board to convince, no careful phrasing required. Just a little girl asking the simplest, truest question anyone had asked him in years. Yes, Marcus said. Yes, I am. Sophia smiled, small, tired, but real, and put her head back down against his shoulder like the matter was settled. For Marcus, it was. He handled the rest before Elena even woke. He called an emergency session with the board, not Camille's kind of emergency, not manufactured leverage, but the real thing. A chairman telling his directors the truth before anyone else could twist it. My brother had a daughter before he died, Marcus told them, standing at the head of the same table where mergers and quarterly earnings usually ruled the conversation. Her name is Sophia. She's my niece. Her mother is a woman named Elena Cruz, who has shown more courage in the last week than most people show in a lifetime. I'm acknowledging both of them, publicly, on my own terms, before anyone else decides what story to tell about my family. He looked directly at Camille as he said the next part. I'm also informing the board that Camille Reyes attempted to use this private family matter as leverage against me during merger negotiations, using information illegally gathered by a member of my household staff. I'll let you draw your own conclusions about what that says about her judgment, and whether that's a partner you want steering this company forward. Camille's face went rigid, but she said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The photographs, the leaked story, the quiet threats, none of it looked like protecting shareholder value once it was dragged into daylight. It looked like exactly what it was. The board's vote, when it came days later, was not close. Camille was out. The merger proceeded on Marcus's terms, cleaner and steadier than it would have under the shadow of a scandal he'd let someone else control. Whitfield was dismissed the same afternoon, given severance and a clear, final conversation about trust, loyalty, and what it costs to sell both for a phone call's worth of gossip. For the first time in years, Marcus walked out of a boardroom feeling like he'd won something that actually mattered. Elena woke the next morning to sunlight, and to Sophia curled against her side in the hospital bed, and to Marcus asleep in the chair beside her, still in yesterday's clothes, having refused to leave. You're still here, she said softly, her voice rough with sleep and healing. Marcus opened his eyes. I told you. I'm not letting either of you disappear again. Elena's eyes filled, but she was smiling now, something loose and unguarded in her face that Marcus hadn't seen since that first afternoon in the garden, watching her with Sophia through a doorway he hadn't been meant to look through. The board, she said. The merger. What happened? I handled it. Marcus. She said his first name for the first time, and it landed somewhere warm in his chest. Tell me you didn't sacrifice everything for us. I sacrificed nothing, Marcus said. I chose what actually mattered. There's a difference. Elena reached for his hand, and he let her take it, and for a long moment neither of them said anything at all, because nothing needed saying. 2 weeks later, once Elena was strong enough and the doctors had cleared her for the trip, Marcus drove them both out to the small cemetery on the edge of the city, where Daniel had been resting alone for 4 years. He hadn't visited once since the funeral. He hadn't been able to. Today, he brought Sophia's hand in his, and Elena walking slowly beside them, still healing but steady, and together they stood in front of a headstone Marcus had spent 4 years too afraid to face alone. Sophia, Marcus said, crouching down to her height, This is your father. Daniel. Sophia looked at the stone with the careful curiosity of a child encountering something important she doesn't fully understand yet. Hi, Papa, she said solemnly. I made a boat. Mama says you would have liked it. Marcus felt tears come before he could stop them, for years of grief finally finding somewhere honest to go. He would have loved it, Marcus said. He would have loved you. I'm sorry it took me so long to know you existed. I'm sorry I didn't listen when he tried to tell me. I promise I'm listening now. Elena's hand found his shoulder, gentle and steady, and Marcus let himself lean into it, just slightly. The first time in 4 years he'd allowed himself to be held up by anyone at all. He forgave you a long time ago, Elena said quietly. He never once blamed you for that phone call. He just ran out of time to have the conversation. That's all. Not your fault. Just terrible, terrible timing. Marcus looked at her, at the woman who'd carried his brother's secret and his niece's safety through 4 years of fear, who'd risked everything by leaving a single note under a teacup because she couldn't bear the thought of Sophia growing up without knowing where she came from. Thank you, he said, for not giving up on making sure she knew. Thank you, Elena said, for actually listening once you finally had the chance. The healing that followed wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. It looked like Sophia's laughter-filling hallways that had been silent for years. It looked like Elena moving out of the staff quarters and into a proper room in the main house, not because anyone declared anything about what she and Marcus were to each other, but because it was simply, obviously, where family belonged. It looked like slow dinners where Marcus asked Elena real questions and actually waited for the answers. It looked like Sophia falling asleep some evenings in the study, curled on the couch while Marcus worked quietly nearby, no longer needing absolute silence to concentrate, having discovered that a little noise in the house didn't ruin anything, it filled something that had been empty far too long. Marcus and Elena never rushed toward a label for what was growing between them. Some things, they'd both learned, were worth letting unfold in their own time, without forcing the ending before it was ready. But some evenings, when Sophia was finally asleep and the house had gone quiet, Elena would bring 2 cups of tea into the study instead of one, and set them down together, and stay. 6 months later, Marcus sat at his desk on a quiet evening, reviewing a contract by lamplight, and reached for his tea without looking up. His fingers brushed paper. He smiled before he even lifted the cup. Folded beneath the saucer, in careful, uneven, 3-year-old handwriting traced over her mother's guiding hand, was a small scrap of paper with a crayon drawing, a lopsided sun, 3 stick figures holding hands, and beneath it, in Elena's neat script transcribing what Sophia had dictated. I love you, Uncle Marcus. Can we have ice cream tomorrow? Marcus laughed, really laughed, the kind that came from somewhere he'd thought had closed for good 4 years ago, and looked up to see Sophia peeking around the study door, unable to contain herself, and Elena just behind her, arms crossed, trying and failing to look stern about her daughter being out of bed. Did you like it? Sophia asked, unable to wait for an answer any longer. I loved it, Marcus said, and meant it more than she would understand for years to come. Ice cream tomorrow. I promise. Sophia beamed and ran to him, and Marcus lifted her into his lap, and Elena came to sit beside them both, and for the first time since March 14th, 4 years ago, the study didn't feel like a room where Marcus waited alone for a phone call that never came. It felt like a home. What would you have done in Marcus's place? Protect the company that thousands of people depended on, or protect the family you never knew you had?